Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Screw Up. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering where were we 2 minutes ago. Long story short, something happened. But of course, it's me. It's Nick London here on Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles, joined by the hitmaker, the record breaker. He is the all the muscle. He's all the hustle. He's on top of the mountain. It takes a hell of a man to knock him off it. Mr. Q-Ball Carmichael, welcome to the show, my man. How are you?
Hey Nick, good man. Another Tuesday night, rock and rolling. It's looking forward to this. We had a great show, I think, last week, and this week's just going to be just as good.
This week's going to be just as great, I guarantee it. We got a hell of a following, of course. The Triple T Radio Nation, everyone is with us, and we're talking all things 90s tag team wrestling, but most importantly, we got to rewind just a little bit. There's a little meat left on that bone from last week. Of course, a lot of people were tuning in. A lot of people were writing their top threes. And I had to laugh because one name that I noticed is on almost everyone's is the Heart Foundation.
Yeah.
And you and I, we talked, we got into quite a bit when it came to the Heart Foundation and, and the Bulldogs, and they were on everyone's list. And I just think it's rather ironic that, four guys that Stu Hart trained, and those are the best of the best, and would go on to have decent careers. What are your feelings on those four guys being on a lot of guys' lists?
Well, I think it's important they were because, first we had the Anvil and we had Brett, and they were a great tag team. We had Brett going to singles competition, but, it was always interchangeable parts. That's what I liked about it. You weren't disappointed if they stuck Davey Boy with somebody, or if they stuck Brett with somebody else, if they put Owen in there. You were never disappointed because it was the Hart Foundation, and I think people were taught that was a faction, more or less, depending on what year it was, whether they were heels or faces. But they were basically interchangeable parts, which I think there was no disappointment when you had any two of those guys in the ring together as a tag team. And I'm glad that the fans recognize that and the importance that these guys, put into 80s wrestling, tag team wrestling, as singles wrestlers. But, we were talking about tag teams, and they were interchangeable parts. My favorite version was probably, the Anvil, because I knew him personally, and Brett. And of course, I've met Brett a bunch of times. I can't say I really know him, but, I just thought that you were never going to be disappointed no matter which two the Hart Foundation went out at tag team action. And it's good to hear that the fans think that way, too, Oftentimes, you get so hooked on any just two of them, and you might have two that were together that were your favorite, but they're always mentioned in unison, and that was the impact that they had in pro wrestling. And again, like you said, Stu Hart trained them, so you knew they were trained well, and all of them were tough as nails. Or tougher
Yes, they were.
They're tougher than a $2 steak.
They sure were, brother.
Yeah.
Two other names that a lot of people said were the Midnight and the Rock and Roll and Demolition. And I thought there's another, but a lot of people made it a point to say Axe and Smash, not Crush.
Yeah.
Which
that's a great point. And I think the problem is probably what we should have done in retrospect is the 80s tag team should have been a two-part series. Because I think inadvertently we left a lot of people out, not because we didn't think they deserved to be in there, but because there was so many. It was a challenge to get them in. And, I have a long history with Axe, and, I like both the guys and good guys. And so, they might not get the mention they deserved, but it was certainly inadvertent versus on purpose. Because, I don't know Smash that well, but Axe, I wrestled him, dozens of times in singles matches, and he would always put a good word in for me, and so those guys are definitely important, and we kind of skipped over them, but I just think it was overwhelming to try to get that into an hour show with commercials and things like that. And in retrospect to the fans, the people who listen to our show, no disrespect intended by leaving anybody out. It's just that it was once we got into it, it was so overwhelming. There were so many good tag teams. And you think about the '80s. I mean, there was everybody had a favorite singles wrestler, but they had a favorite tag team. Now, if you ask somebody today, I'm sure they got a favorite wrestler, but most people don't have a favorite tag team because it's not focused on like it
Oh,
was in the '90s. So, it was great to scan over it. And, look, if we left somebody out, it was definitely inadvertently, not on purpose. That's for sure.
no, no, absolutely not. Um, and number one, I mean, people have to understand that in a 1 hour show, you are trying to cram everything in, which is kind of like what you said. Hindsight is 2020. It should have probably been 2 episodes, but
Yeah,
we crammed because we didn't plan. We got a couple profile shows coming up that we want to do, and
yeah,
everything kind of gets crammed sometimes, and we don't really think, hey, we need to have more than one episode. So
right. And
it
then
happens.
old Cubo will go on a tangent and start talking about, oh, this guy and I were one time in Ontario, and there's
And you
10
know
minutes.
what? You do. But that's
It's
okay because that's what we love about you.
Thanks, man. It is what I do.
And that's
I
why you're on the top of the mountain, and I'm not about to go up there and try to knock you off it.
I wander down memory lane. Unfortunately, sometimes I get lost. I didn't leave a trail of breadcrumbs. I can't find my way home. So,
Tonight we're breaking in the '90s, and a lot of guys don't realize, but when you started in the '90s, there was still tag team wrestling was still pretty hot. All the way up to probably '94 ish, '95, and then Vince had a thing where it was let's throw these guys. When people talk about it, I don't think of like Owen Hart and Yokozuna because they were a couple time tag champs, but they were kind of thrown together. But then I think of
sure.
like Owen and the Bulldog, who had one of the longest running tag team title runs in the '90s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And,
some of it's hard, but no, go ahead,
no, I was just
please.
gonna say, and that's again at the top of the show. We didn't meet. We had a lot of tag teams that were what's called makeshift tag teams in the '90s. You started going to a makeshift tag team, and the division of tag teams was so strong in the '70s, and I think it reached its peak in the '80s, and definitely by the end of the 1990s, the beginning of the Attitude Era, it started to definitely change, and unfortunately, tag team wasn't focused on. But man, and that's another thing I really don't like about the big television show that's on is I bet if 100 people that were polled that watched '80s and early mid to '90s tag teams, if they were asked what division would they like to see pushed as much as the heavyweight championship, I bet it'd be the tag team championship
I bet you
because
would.
and I liked it. I wrestled with Wise Guy Jimmy Cicero, Matt Bowman for about 7 years as a tag team, and we really got to wrestle some big name tag teams. And they helped us because the psychology is completely different in a tag team match.
Well,
You really want to get good heat. You never have to cheat in front of the ref. That's why, as a heel, you use your partner. And you never have to cheat in front of the ref. And I've always said it in many posts that true, real heat is when you're cheating and everybody can see it but the referee, but don't make the referee look like a dumbass by doing it right in front of him, not expect him to see it. So, in tag team wrestling, and this is what I try to train people and explain to them to do. When Joey Mercury and Christian York were tagging together, it was like, look, man, if you're working somebody, let them know they do not have to cheat in front of the ref. That's what your tag partner's for. Use that guy. That gets super, super heat. So, but yeah, well, let's jump right into this thing, man, so we don't get pinched on time again. But
yeah.
I want to talk about two tag teams right off the bat. Well, no, I know all of them, so I can't really do that. But I did want to start out with Edge and Christian, and the reason I want to start out with them is I was there the night Christian got his contract, and we had dressed together. Him and I had been on a show down south together years before, and he ended up getting stranded down south for like a week because the promoter couldn't come up with the money to get him back home to Canada. And I'll never forget the night that he got signed. He walked in our dressing room, and we didn't see him after we ate. And he walked in the dressing room, and he was white as a sheet, man. It was like he looked like something was wrong. Like he had got a phone call from home and something was wrong. And I'm like, yo, what's up, brother? And he's listening to me, he goes, I just got signed by Vince. I'm like, what? But he was so overwhelmed and didn't see it coming that, they brought him in, all the paperwork, got the deal done, got him back, put him on that night. And I'll never forget the look on his face because I swore something was wrong. And I think it was just what nobody saw it coming. He didn't see it coming. He was doing piecemeal like Matt and Jeff were a lot in the 80s up there. And so when he got signed, I'll never forget the night he walked in the locker room dressed already, but walked back in with some papers and said, I just got signed. So, and Edge and Christian went on to have really a storied
Oh,
career,
yes, they
but
did.
you can tie those guys to so many other tag teams by starting with them, you
Yeah.
know. And who do you think was their biggest rival?
If I really had to pick, I would have to go with the Hardys. I would have to, but only because I felt that between the two, they were able to, they were able to, the word I'm looking for, my goodness, elevate each other.
Yeah,
That
right.
ladder match from No Mercy, I always say that was the match that put them on the map. That was when people took notice. So yes, I have to go with Matt and Jeff. And the other thing with Matt and Jeff is, I think that they were so young when they started working as enhancement talent that they were
Yeah.
able to really learn and really catch fire at a time that the tag team division was really down. Do you know what I mean? Like it was really
Oh no, I
flatlined.
agree. It was in a lull. It was in a lull
Yeah.
for years. And when Christian Edge and Matt and Jeff, they all got signed. They all went up there. They all started being competitive. I think that was just a. I think those four guys kind of reignited the tag team division at that time, in my opinion. I'm a
No,
little
they
partial
did.
big because I've known Matt and Jeff since they were kids, and they originally started tagging up a lot together. They did singles and when they had Omega, but they would tag up too. And it's like, look, man, one of I think the single best tag match I ever saw was actually the Briscoe brothers, not the older Briscoe brothers, the younger ones, when
Oh my goodness, they're awesome.
if you can check out the match, and I'm trying to think of where the venue is at. It wasn't Loco and Joko. I'll find out. I asked Shane tonight, and I'll put it up. And if you guys can get that DVD from Omega, where Matt and Jeff wrestled the Briscoe brothers. I mean, I'm leaning through the curtain watching it with Ricky Steamboat, and I'm like, these guys are good together. And he looks at me, and goes, "These guys are great together." you know, it was that good. It was that good.
Man, when
So
you find that fire, and of course you can't you in the same breath you have to bring up the Dudley Boys. It's not even they just they were salt and pepper. They
yeah.
really were. The three teams really were. They were the perfect recipe for success at a time that you know TLCs, all that was unheard of. That they would reinvent tag team wrestling, and you know, I mean, I know you've watched those TLCs.
Oh,
The original from SummerSlam, still
unbelievable.
in my top 10. Always going to be.
And see, to me, like these guys were so good at what they did that they were able to take a TLC match and make it out of tables, ladders, and chairs, but also make it psychologically sound and make it very compelling. I mean, those matches were compelling. That one was just, I mean, it was really one of those things that
It was
had
a
you on.
masterpiece.
Yeah, it was a masterpiece. Yeah, and
Yeah, it was a
you see my
masterpiece.
you see my post where I always say that look, a good Salvador Dali painting and Picasso, they start with a blank canvas and they paint this picture that goes in an art gallery. And what I see in an art gallery, what most people see in an art gallery, I see in a wrestling ring. Start with a blank canvas. You get some guys in there, and every once in a while, two guys or four guys will create a masterpiece that goes up on the internet and it stays up there for all time, just like the Picasso in the art gallery in New York City, you know, and people will get to see it and watch it. And that's a match right there that will hold water, you know, 18 years ago, 20 years ago when it happened, whatever it was, 21. But it will continue to hold water throughout as long as there's pro wrestling out there. That
Yeah,
match will always
yeah,
hold up. And really, it was the precursor to all the other TLC matches and hardcore matches besides what ECW done. But I mean, as far as in the WWE, you know, those guys really set the bar super, super high for that. So those guys are great. But the Dudleys, look, I know them both. I met them years and years ago. And I can tell you that, you know, in my opinion, great guys, willing to work with anybody, you know, willing to do anything. I seen him in there with May and Moolah, and
oh,
you know, tag team partner. I had a chance to wrestle May and Moolah a couple times, and you know, but I mean, just two more guys that understood two important things. Number one was the psychology, telling a story, but also how to wrestle as a tag team. You know, and that is such a finesse part of wrestling. Most of your makeshift tag teams never get that good. But when you have a true tag team and they're traveling together and they're on the road together, I mean, it really makes all the difference in how well they perform in the ring. And of course, we know Matt and Jeff got along great. We know Christian Edge did. We know the Dudleys did. And I think at Demolition, as we talked about, all those guys that were great tag teams basically lived together, you know, back then, 25 days a month, you know, for years.
yeah,
And
they
so,
did. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about. I'll throw a team at you that would basically almost immediately things would change. Is the Outsiders over in WCW? You know, at a time that they were both very successful in the WWF at the time, as Razor and Diesel, they go over to WCW. We're going to package these guys together as the Outsiders. Where's your head at on these two big? I mean, they were big men.
well, you know, I'm looking at these guys going from being successful in WWE to going to WCW, and I'm like, well, what are they going to do that's going to make them any good? And then they come out with the Outsiders, which is also named after a classic movie. And for me, they epitomize that gimmick. I seeing those guys as the Outsiders, it'd be hard for me to imagine any better name for a tag team that is had the success they had in one federation and then jumps into another one because truly they were the Outsiders.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
were.
there really couldn't be a more aptly named team than the Outsiders when they went to WCW, and they had immediate impact. And you know, big guys, jeez, you know, I mean, Kevin Nash is huge, and freaking Scott Hall's a monster. You
Yeah.
know, he doesn't look as big when he stands next to Nash, but he's a big dude too.
No, he is. I agree. I mean, there were so many. I mean, they would feud with some of the greats. I mean, we're going to talk about the Steiners, but before we get there, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a few more WCW teams. Obviously, we're going to jump back and forth. We got
Yeah.
some ECW teams. So sit tight. We're coming right back. We got lots more. Don't go anywhere, guys. All right, guys, we're back here on Turnbuckles, Trunks, and Titles on the Triple T Radio Network. I am Nick. This is Cue Ball Carmichael. We're talking 90s tag team wrestling here. Q, what about. Uh, sorry. Don't worry, I muted that. That was bad. Now, let's try this again. I'm going to throw a name at you that, one guy will go on to be maybe one of the biggest stars in the entire professional wrestling. It's definitely debatable. Stone Cold Steve Austin. What about the Hollywood Blondes? Where's your head at with that?
Never liked the gimmick.
No?
No, I
Not
never
a
liked it.
fan.
No, I thought, I'm like, I can see these guys in better roles than this. I didn't like, look, the guys were talented. I didn't like the gimmick. I just thought, the whole gimmick thing, and I never got into
I
it, to be honest.
appreciate that. No, I appreciate your honesty with it. I personally, I liked it. I was a big fan of Flying Brian.
For
Uh,
sure.
Stone Cold, I was just learning about Steve, really. But Flying Brian, I liked, and I was familiar.
Right.
They were a neat team, and of course, so many teams at that point. Let's move over to Smoky Mountain. They would end up with a certain team over there, two young kids just starting out, and they're going to be called the Thrill Seekers. Chris Jericho and Lance Storm. I mean, now there's a team that would end up, being two of the best that ever did it. And obviously, Jericho today, a former AEW champion, just finished with Orange Cassidy at All Out. I don't know if you saw it. I haven't watched it yet. I will check out Jericho's match.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
where's your head at with that? Two young guys, two
Oh,
blondes coming in like that.
I loved it. I thought they were great together. I really, when I saw them together, I'm like, oh, these guys are going to be a permanent fixture in the tag team world. I never really imagined them going down a separate road at that point because tag team was still strong.
Yeah, it
And I'm
was.
okay. It needed some young guys coming up, right? And you got the Hardys, and you got the Dudley Boys, and you got, um, you know, uh, uh, you got all these young teams coming up, but then this super young team comes up a little bit before that, and it's Jericho and it's Storm, and I'm like, these guys are going to end up going to both places. They're going to end up holding titles in both these federations. I just thought they were incredibly strong and really, super crisp moves, like really good. I
They
mean,
were crisp.
I, I didn't expect to see the direction that they both took. And now, arguably, Jericho is probably going to go down in history as one of the best because he has had a career that has now spanned damn near 30 years.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah, easy.
and you're thinking about a guy who hasn't been out for 6 months or a year, didn't take any super major injuries. A guy that threw his body around pretty good. Um, but just, I mean, God, talk about super talented team. And then Jericho going on his own and excelling. Who can forget when he left WCW, the big
Oh,
Y2J deal they made at the Millennium at WWE. It was
it was
Y2J
huge.
for 2 months or 3 months,
Three
and
months.
shows up and Y2K, Y2J. I got the gimmick, and he showed up and he just took off from there. But
Yeah.
my it took me a while to warm up to him as a singles wrestler, but then I started watching him, and you almost forget that he was a tag team wrestler at that point because he's excelling so well as a singles wrestler. And very young when he came up with Y2J, getting a major push even before he gets to the Fed. So, I think they were a great tag team, though. I think that, if they had stayed together, there may have been a chance that they spend, 5, 8, 10 years longer together. So I thought they were great. I really did. I thought they were underrated. They were great.
You know what? Another team that I often think of that they didn't stay together as long as I think a lot of people would have liked, but Man on a Mission,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah,
Mabel and Mo, and they were cool, and Oscar. But I
yeah.
always felt like Mabel could have been more. I felt that, and please disagree with me if you think I'm wrong, but I always felt like they killed him after they switched him to Viscera. You know, he was cool with the Mabel with the purple and the King Mabel. I just
Sure.
felt like when they threw that full suit on him and they called him Viscera, and I don't know, man. Maybe it's just me, but I hated it. Never liked it. I think he had way more potential.
Well, I think and Sir Mo's a good friend of mine, and when Nelson Frazier played Viscera and
Yeah.
King Abel, when he passed away, I jumped online and with a bunch of buddies helped raise some money for his widow to help
Yes.
bury him. So, he was that kind of guy that had an impact on me years ago, before he was ever Man on a Mission. He used to wrestle with us up in West Virginia on the independent shows and stuff. And always just a super nice guy, big dude, gentle giant, you know. And I think if him and Mo had stayed together, maybe with Oscar management, but I think that they really, I would have expected a lot longer career for those two. I think they were just different enough, but just similar enough to be great together. I really do. And don't get me wrong, Mo went on to have a great singles career. Bobby Horn, buddy of mine, and they did well after they split up. But I think that was I don't think that was anything they planned on doing. I thought they were going to stay together. You know, I think that was their plan originally. But what happens if Vince wakes up one day on the wrong side of the bed? He comes out. He goes, "I'm gonna split them up and keep the big guy." So
Well, we always call it the Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty treatment. And we could sit here and we can debate that for hours because every name we mention, you can usually pinpoint which one is Shawn and which one's Marty. And
right.
I'll take one for an example with the Smoking Guns, which you had Billy and Bart, but again, Billy just had a certain look to him that Bart didn't. And, Billy, who is still going today,
It
but
still looks great.
oh my god, dude, the guy hasn't aged a bit in 30
And
years.
and he's super charismatic. And I was booked on him once with Tom show, and I think I wrestled Beefcake that night, and they were traveling together. And I got to tell you, man, he just, I mean, just a good dude too, a nice guy, very passionate about the business, man. I remember seeing him flip out on that last Tough Enough or whatever it was,
I do
last
too.
it
With
was
ZZ.
on the crocodile guy.
Yep.
I didn't lose his shit. And I'm like, yeah, that's what the business is missing. Guys that are so passionate about it, they're willing to put it all out there
Yep.
and just let it go. And it wasn't as much letting it go on somebody as it was letting it go on people who don't take the business as serious in that day and age as we did 30 years ago or 35 years ago when all of us guys got in it together. There's a different mindset in the 80s and 90s that there is today with wrestling. Now, I will tell you, we had options. We had WWE and WCW World Championship Wrestling. We had still some I don't call them territories, but we had an independent circuit. So we had it. I think we were the guys that came up in the 80s and 90s. We were more believing that we were going to make it eventually if we stayed in the gym, if we worked out, if we canned. I think we all thought we were going to make it to some level, some degree. Whether it was going to be WCW or WWF at the time, or when ECW popped up, even go there. And I think that everybody knew back then. And Mike Howell, Mike Maverick, and I talk about it. I talk about it with other guys who've been around a long time. Is we had the mindset that look, if we put our head down and we work hard and we stick to it, we're going to get noticed and we're going to get a shot. Or one of our buddies is going to go up there and mention our name. They're going to say, bring them up. A lot of those options are gone now for guys. I
Oh
mean,
yes.
you look at what's going on now with the roster at the Performance Center, the guys under contract, the guys at NXT, the guys at the top of WWE, and you've got TNA, but now you've got AEW, which seems to be I'm telling you, if I was in my 20s or 30s right now, I would be crushing it in the gym. I'd be tanning and I'd be getting my face in front of Cody Rhodes or somebody over there that
Yep.
makes decisions. And I would get a chance to get in there, man. But I was a dedicated gym guy for most of my career. And, I would just be in the best shape. And it's not being 275 pounds like it was at one point and benching 400 pounds anymore. You can be in great cardiovascular condition and shredded, and you can go ahead and have the ability to get signed. So I think that it's a different era, but I think guys back then tried a little bit harder. Talk about switch gears to a couple guys that tried real hard, um, and they're I like their gimmick, and I'm going to switch over to the Godwins.
Ooh, there you go. Henry O and
Look, different look,
Phineas.
both big guys, right?
Very big guys.
Big guys. Yeah, I know Mark Canterbury. He was from Northern Virginia where I was living, and he was buddies with a buddy of mine. But I met him up there, and I was talking to him, and big farm boy, big guys. But
Oh,
it
yeah.
was a it was a great farm boy, big guy look, man. I mean, they were hog farmers. That was what they were representing, and I think that gimmick fit them perfect. I
Hey, and
really
and
sent them
had
over, man.
and hats off to Hillbilly Jim for pulling that off too. I mean,
That's
he
right.
he was the perfect guy at the right time at the right place. I mean, he really gave them a rub. I don't care what anyone says. He gave them a good rub being there.
Absolutely, he did. Look, anytime you can get a guy that was as big a star as he was, to give you a rub, man, especially up there, it's going to make a big difference. You know what I mean? And it did. And you know, I thought for their size and their physical condition, I thought they had a perfect gimmick, and I liked it. I was always a big fan of that gimmick, because I come from an era of wrestling where not everybody looked like Scott Hall. There was guys that looked like Harley Race, and guys that looked like Dusty Rhodes, and guys that looked like Tully. And there was such a variety of look, and it never really mattered, as long as you had the passion, the skill, and the ability. So I think the Godwins was a great gimmick. It was just different enough to make a difference, and I think it fit them both perfectly. So I was a big fan of those guys, man.
No, and that's a great team. I'm gonna throw another one at you. Two guys that were I would say tail end. They're finishing up. They were Money Inc. And I thought it was nice for Ted to go out that way because it gave him a chance to work with a guy who had such a great gimmick. You had your money and your taxes. You always
Yeah,
hear about the Undertaker should have teamed up with
tax.
IRS because you would have
Yeah,
death and taxes. But that was a great way for Ted DiBiase to go out. I thought.
yeah. I think so too. And Mike Rotunda, can't say enough good things
I
about him. I
love
mean,
Mike Rotunda.
he's from he was born and raised 35 miles from where I'm from. He went 30 miles on the other side of where I lived in upstate New York to go to Syracuse, and just a great all around athlete and a guy that he proved he could pull off any gimmick. It didn't matter. You know what I mean? When him and Barry were together, they were just tough as a $2 steak again. You know. And I think at that point, everybody would like that death and taxes gimmick. But The Undertaker was really established pretty quick up there as an individual talent.
Yes, he
And,
was.
with Percy Pringle with him and Paul Bearer with him, I mean, I think it was a great gimmick for him. But I think the money and the taxes, if you make money, you got to pay taxes. They go hand in hand. So
Yep.
I think that was a great gimmick. And I do think it was a great way for Ted to go out. Absolutely do. Yeah. And he was always so good in the ring anyway. There's a guy that could have wrestled until he was 60 years old without breaking a sweat. He
Yep.
was that good. I remember the first time I saw him, I'd seen him years ago. Before I ever saw him wrestle, I seen him do an interview. And Wasn't that impressed. And then I saw him in the ring, and I was like, whoa. I mean, he was just, you could tell he's second generation, man. He was
Yeah.
just so good. So good. So, you know,
Well,
and now, so I mean, I think they were great. Um, one of the tag teams I want to talk about real quick is a couple guys that were real good friends of mine. Um, got to wrestle them a lot. Cicero and I did over in Pennsylvania. They really, I think they should have gotten a lot farther than they did. And that was the Pitbulls in ECW, man. You know, and Gary Wolf and Anthony, those guys were great. Anthony passed 17, 18 years ago. It was a terrible loss to everybody that knew him. But I mean, the Pitbulls were just, they had this big, intimidating gimmick. And I hadn't met him yet. So we go over and they bring him into Steel City and they go, hey, you guys are going to work with Cue Ball and Cicero. So they come over and are like, hey, we know who you guys are and stuff like that. I'm thinking, it's just like first time you were Legion of Doom, right? You're like, oh no. And
yeah.
so it was like, they said, the only thing you guys can have 3/4 of the match, we don't care. Just give us the super bomb off the top. And I put my thumb just where I said, yeah, he'll take that. Like, he'll take that. And
No
then
doubt.
every time we wrestled him, which is probably 6, 8 times in Western PA. I mean, he always was a champ and took the super bomb. I was older than him. I go, look, I'm too old to take that thing, man. It could kill me. But those guys, look, man, it was so easy to work with them. They were so good and they were so giving. I mean, when they were baby faces, they would let us, we'd shine them up in the beginning, but I mean, we would put so much heat on a guy. And the whole basis of that is the hot tag means more when you put more heat on a guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, have the illegal man distract the ref when they actually make a tag and the ref, puts them back out. But these guys, working with those two guys, and working with a tag team that we talked about last week that Sister and I worked with a lot, the Bushwhackers. I mean, those two teams were tag team specialists. So we're getting advice from a up and coming set of young guys that burst on the scene in the '90s and were hot as fire. Everybody thought they were going to get a deal with Vince. I think they could have, but I think Paul might have kiboshed it. But and then you've got the sheep herders / bushwhackers who are working with you and just want to pass on some knowledge. So, those guys really a whole different mentality for tag team wrestling. Really taught us a lot. But the Pitbulls, I know that they may not have a big WWE run or anything, but those guys were great guys, easy to work with. Gary Wolf, if you're watching, man, I enjoyed every second being in the ring with you guys. You guys were so generous, and that's the thing. It's like when you work, and I learned this after working some names, is most all those guys are working in your backyard. They're not working in the WWE. These guys all were so generous with giving, a lot to the other guy. Of course, we're going to put them over at the end because everybody goes happy at the end of the
Yeah.
night.
Most
But
certainly.
just super generous in the ring, totally unintimidating in person. Both soft-spoken guys. Just really enjoyed working with the Pitbulls. I wanted to throw them in there, and now I'll let you throw one in because I know who you're going to say.
Oh, real nice. I want to talk a bit about Scott and Rick. I mean, the Steiner brothers were truly, at a time that they in '93 when they came up to the WWE. The WWE had never seen anyone like that. They were over in Japan. They were down in the WCW. They were in the NWA. They were so hot and on fire. You couldn't help but be
Yeah.
inspired by everything they were doing. I just want to know in your mind because they were legit brothers, and sometimes brothers are hard to get along. But where would you rank them in your feelings? How good were the Steiner brothers?
I think they rank right up there, in the very top. I just do. I think because they're amateur backgrounds, I think because they're athletic, I think because of the way they kept themselves in shape, and together it's like the Hardys, right? Everybody always likes to see an actual team of two brothers out there working together, and everybody knew they were. And I just thought the Steiner brothers, I thought they were one of the best tag teams in the '90s, really, especially for bigger guys. I mean, they were pretty heavily muscled guys,
They were.
but they
They were.
moved, they moved like they were smaller guys. I mean, it was deceiving because they're so big, but they were, and the dog faced gremlin. I mean, geez, I used to wear my hat backwards when I was in the '90s, and I had a massive goatee, and people will double take, and I'm like, no, let me take the hat off. You'll tell them I'm not him. But people go, you look like Rick Steiner with your hat on backwards. I'm like, oh, thanks, man.
And I mean, Scott was doing a Frankensteiner when a Frankensteiner wasn't standard procedure either.
Well,
You
yeah, and
didn't see that every day.
no, and he wasn't as big as he got later, but he was still a big dude.
He
But
was a big dude.
they were so athletic, man, so athletic. I mean, these guys wrestled in high school, they wrestled in college, and he went to the pros. But unusual is it? And Kurt Angle's one of those guys. It's Brock is one of those guys. It used to be unusual for successful high school and college wrestlers to turn the corner and to make it in pro wrestling. A lot of guys struggled with that.
Yeah.
It didn't make. But these guys, smooth transition, great guys, scary, like you said, man. I mean, Scott doing the Frankensteiner. I mean, just jump up on that rope, boom, so fast. You think you weighed 210 instead of 240. So
Yep.
yeah, I
Yep.
think they're. And there's the '90s is tough because the '90s saw just as many good tag teams as the '80s, but I don't think in the '80s, to me, I mean, you had like the Fantastics were great, Midnight Express was great, and you had the Rock and Roll Express, and it was easy to put the Rock and Roll Express on top because they wrestled the entire decade together, and they went all over the world, so it
Yeah.
was easy to do. This is going to be a little bit tougher when we get down to the end here, and trying to, let's just say we pick the top three,
Yeah.
the top five. It's not going to be an easy job because you also got the natural disasters in there.
Yeah.
And why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we'll talk about the natural disasters, earthquake and typhoon.
I love it, brother. I'm in.
Well, I got to tell you, we were talking about the natural disasters when we went to break, guys, and I got to tell you, John Tenta, who was earthquake, and Fred Altman, that was typhoon. These guys, you unless you saw them in person, you had no idea how big they were.
Oh,
People used to look at Tenta and say, "Well, he wasn't in that great of shape." The guy was 6'10". He was massive, and Fred had been a powerlifter
oh,
at one point, big
I
as a
love
rock.
Fred.
Oh, me too. He's a great guy
Love
too.
Fred.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the natural disasters got to get put right up in there because
Yes,
those
they
guys
do.
in the early '90s, especially, they were a mainstay tag team. When tag team was going through a rough period of time, I mean, they were there. They were
Yes,
there.
they
The guy
were. Yeah, they
was,
kept it going.
yeah, they kept it going. Until they brought in the new blood, which was nice of them. So. I can't say enough good things about the natural disasters. Just huge, huge dudes. And of course, look, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Owen and Yokozuna teaming together. I
Yes.
mean, just throw that in one more
Hey,
time.
God
I know
rest them.
the yes, God rest her soul.
Yeah.
Um, was fortunate enough to get dressed a lot up there with the guys. Yoko, I really got to know Rodney when he started. When he left the WWE, he started working independence. He worked for Maryland Championship Wrestling and
Yes, he
stuff.
did. Yeah.
I room next door to him, and he's like, "You gonna go out tonight?" I said, "No, man, I'm tired." He goes, "Why don't we just get some pizza and hang out and eat?" I said, "Okay." So hung out with him, got to talk Samoan family because originally I was trained at the Peter Maivia's wrestling school in Hawaii, which was all Samoans. So the Samoan community is really near and dear to my heart, and that can roll us right into the head shrinkers.
Oh
You
man, they were
know?
another hot team back then.
Oh
They were
yeah.
on fire.
And look, I've been close to Samu for a long time. He worked for me when I ran. I used to run Chickadee Island, Virginia. Held about 700 people. We used to pack that place, and I'd have Bundy come in. I'd have Sammy would come in for me, and I think the head shrinkers were. I think the problem with them is they were really wrestling under a big shadow of the Wild Samoans.
They
You know what I
were,
mean?
and that's
I,
all they were. They were made to be the Wild
yeah,
Samoans, but they weren't. They were so good. Their careers speak for themselves. I mean, we
yes.
know Rikishi would go on to have the Sultan gimmick. He'd have the Fatu, the Surfer. He went on to have a great career. I mean, too
Yeah,
cool. You can't
yeah,
take anything from him. Can
yeah,
I quickly got to throw in, it's only right that we throw in Doom and the APA. I think there
yeah.
are two that need to be thrown in.
Damn.
They made a lot of money off Damn.
look, let me tell you what I loved is when Ron Simmons went up there, and the first night he came out and that gimmick, and he says, somebody said Ron Simmons. He goes, "My name's Farouk Assad, fool." And I was
Yeah.
just, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it how he suddenly went radical, like Muslim. You know what I mean? It was just great. I mean, it was a great change because you'd always seen him as Ron Simmons and the football player and stuff, and this showed a lot of versatility for him to
That
jump
did.
over that. And of course, he teamed with Butch Reed, but he also teamed with Bradshaw with The Rock. I mean, it was just. I thought it was a great gimmick. I really liked it. I really
So did
did.
I. So did I. Well, I think this pretty much will take us down to maybe picking our top three. I don't know how the hell we're gonna do it, but if
Mm,
you got any, if you want to throw a couple honorable mentions in there, I will. And you got to go to the Impact Boys or the Impact Players, and you got to
Impact.
go to that was just incredible, Lance Storm. You got to throw Sabu and RVD in there. You got
Yeah.
to throw the Body Donnas in there.
Yeah,
Marty
them.
Jannetty and the 1-2-3 Kid.
Yeah,
The
the hardcore chair swinging freaks,
yeah,
Axel and Balls.
yeah.
Got them in there. So I mean, I'm going to go based on. I always tend to go based on longevity of career and how long they're working and still getting over the way that they're trying to get over. I mean, that's the only way I know how to do it. So I'm gonna throw. Um, I'm gonna throw number three. This is really tough for me, man.
You
This is
throw your three, I'll throw my three. You throw your two, I'll
okay.
throw my two.
Okay. Okay.
You
Good.
go
I'm,
first.
I'm gonna throw my number three is the Dudley Boys. I
That's
just
pretty good.
long career. They're in a tough category. And now, look, any of my top three can be interchangeable in any way. Let me just say that.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
We
you
did.
know,
We said this last week too. I mean, don't judge
I,
us.
well, that's because you don't want them to think, well, I didn't think I was better than that. Yes, I think you guys were great,
Y'all
and
made the conversation at hand.
yeah, exactly. So you're number three.
My number three, I would have to say, oh my, probably the New Aged Outlaws.
Okay, okay, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
I'd
good.
have to go with the New Age Outlaws.
And we didn't even get to talk too much about them, but yeah, they were hot, man.
They
They were
were.
hot. That whole DX gimmick was great too.
Oh,
Um, I'm gonna go with my number two is gonna be Edge and Christian. Think they jumped on the scene. They announced their presence with authority. They had some great matches. And then we're going to go to almost nepotism for my number one. But give me your number two.
that was really good. It's funny. My number two would have to be the Hardy Boys.
Beautiful. Well, it makes sense.
Who's your number one?
The Hardy Boys.
I thought so. Yeah.
Look, look, look.
No, no, no. That's
No, no.
cool. I know you love them.
Well, I do, and they're friends of mine. I've known them for a long time, but I've seen a lot more Hardy Boy matches on Independence or an Omega that would blow the roof off the WWE because they weren't getting somebody in the mouthpiece and the earpiece. The rep wasn't getting it taken up for. You know what I mean? They were given as long as they wanted to do it out there. And the most amazing thing is to see the Briscoe brothers go 33 minutes and everybody's still on their feet for the match. And there's 2,000 people in a gym made for 1,900 and half of them are standing. So I mean, for that, because I've seen a lot of their matches that other people haven't seen, and I probably paid more attention to their careers, because Matt and I stay in touch regularly, and Jeff and I once in a while, but I mean always Matt and I've stayed in touch, and but you got to look at the length of their careers. Not only they just burst on the scene as enhancement in the '90s, but then they did something that a lot of people didn't do. They became headliners in the '90s, and they carried that throughout the 2 decades of the millennium in some fashion or another. And I'm taking that into consideration. But, and yes, they're brothers, but I mean, they've been wrestling together since the early '90s. We're talking 28, 27, 28 years. They share a common wrestling brain because they never have to talk when they're working somebody. And I just think that they have had such a lengthy career, and they always seem to end up back together at some point. I think I got to take all that into consideration. And Matt and Jeff got to be my favorite all-time '90s tag team.
Well, it's funny because you said longevity, and that got me thinking about guys that are still connected, whether it's at the hip or not, but they're still somewhat together. Whether it's in the ring or not, it didn't matter.
That's right. That's
And,
right.
and you and I are so close in our picks. My number one has to be Edge and Christian, and
They're
they had.
Canadian. How you dare?
They are Canadian. I am a little biased, but I
You should admit.
absolutely love them. And I thought whether it was the kazoos, whether it was the 5 second pose for those with the benefit of flash photography, I just thought that they were so far ahead of their time. And still,
Yeah,
like you said about Matt and Jeff, they still can come back together anytime.
that's
And
right.
E and C are still coming back together all the time.
Sure.
So great picks.
Look, yeah, I know. Our number one and two were reversed, but like I said too, is the top three are interchangeable. So, I think we definitely think alike. I think people see that our chemistry together on the show. We're best of friends, and I think this makes this the fastest hour of the week for me, and
Yeah.
one of the most fun hours because I get, don't get me wrong, I enjoy my family and everything. I get along great with them. But the point being is when I can sit down with a buddy and just talk wrestling and get enough people interested where they're actually going to watch the show. I mean, last week we had about 500 views total on all our pages. Look, we're not on Sirius Satellite XM radio. We're probably never going to be, but we have some loyal and dedicated fans. I mean, we have Mr. Collette down there in Tennessee. Brian Kanabrowski always watches us. Anthony always hangs in there and watches us. My guys and my crew in Jersey and Philly does. So, look, I feel pretty blessed to have the people that watch and listen to us and come back every week because obviously they're enjoying it. And for me, it's a lot of fun because look, the old engine is still running, but it ain't gonna run 18 feet, jump over a top rope, and land on somebody anymore. So this is my wrestling. So I appreciate y'all indulging me. And look, we love you. We like to ask one favor. If you could please, if you're listening, go over to YouTube, Triple T Radio, one word, Triple T Radio. That's triple, the letter T radio, all scrunched together, space, live. And go over to YouTube and please hit a like and subscribe, but also watch some of the videos that Nick and I did. I think you'll be pretty impressed with the production. Nick is in charge of producing all of our shows, and the difference now, his skill and ability has come a long way. We've been very fortunate to get some good sponsors like he can. But just check out the shows. There's also a lot of Truth Busters over there, and they're under the same thing, Triple T Radio, space, live. And go on over there and check it out, guys. If you get a chance, please share this with your friends. If you enjoyed it, your friends might enjoy it too. We'd appreciate it.
And
So for this week's edition of Triple T Radio, it's Cue Ball Carmichael and Nick London. And we'll see you next week at the same time,